All right, this is Jimmy Cab's Tape to Broadcast, a 50-wood-50 interview series in Bulldozer Magazine. Wow, 1991. I am here with Carl Agel of Corrosion of Conformity Blind.
Yes.
Let's explain why it's Corrosion of Conformity Blind.
Well, specifically, I was the singer on the Blind records, the only album I was on. I was in the band from '89 to '93. That was the only thing I'm recognized for doing specifically in Corrosion is that album. But it's a very proud moment where the band was in transition from its hardcore crossover roots to more of a rock and metal sound, and that's where a lot of the experimentation went on. And it was an interesting, special moment in the band's legacy, and has become a really important album for a lot of people.
It's very interesting when we think back to 1991, Corrosion of Conformity and the Blind record, because as you mentioned, that was a pivotal moment where COC went from the quote-unquote crossover into this more heavier, more what is now known as like a doomish, stoner, Sabbathy type of vibe. But what is not known, and what is never get credit is that back in 1983-84, they were Black Flag and Sabbath fans, man. So it was a natural progression. And when that record came out, you got a lot of shit.
Yep. Yes.
Talk to me about that. I hate to bring that up, but you got a lot of shit.
Well, for some reason, it was this perception that this outsider had come in and rockstar and had bent people to his will, and somehow single-handedly I was responsible for, saying, pushing them away from punk rock and their indie background, and you will conform to some kind of metal, big arena kind of thing, and espouse different values. And that was, nothing could be further from the case. I saw them in 1984 playing in Connecticut. I was part of the Connecticut hardcore scene in Southern Connecticut, and we were always in New York City going to shows, New Jersey, Connecticut, and I saw them play a bunch. In fact, my band Seizure opened up for them in 1985. On the Animosity tour, and I saw them multiple times at CB's and the Anthrax Gallery and all over the place, and became friends with them. And we were all in the same boat. We were just punk rock guys that were embracing some of the heavier, more visceral metal kind of vibes, but still espousing intelligence and promoting forward thinking, on top of this kind of music. And but nothing could be further from the truth. It was a parallel evolution. We were all in it together, and they were experimenting with stuff, and I was just there, and I was proud to write lyrics that still carried on that punk rock aggro kind of vibe, and it's just absolutely absurd, to say that.
I was a COC fan from the beginning. And I've been following the band for over 30 years, and I always liked the fact that there are multiple factions of COC. But for whatever reason, back in 1991, when you went into that direction, when the band completely turned into a five-piece, right, and when Dance of the Dead came out on video, boy, oh boy, man, not only did it really separate the COC fans, but it really showed kind of at the time, how ahead of your time you guys really were. Look at it now, 20-something years later, right. St. Vitus is like a big band now, man. You know what I mean? Back at that time, St. Vitus was getting spit on, bro.
Exactly.
So how do you feel now after all these decades? Are you comfortable with the legacy of the band? Are you still somewhat baffled by what happened at that time? Talk to me about it. And what made you guys do COC Blind now in 2015?
Well, we had a painful divorce in '93. In fact, I was in the studio recording Deliverance for 5 weeks when I was fired by the producer. I don't want to get into the sour grapes of that and what went down necessarily. It doesn't really matter to anybody in the long run. It just there was the usual thing of a typical rock band with its internal politics and ego play stuff, and it happened, and you can't change that. And it hurt, of course. We all parted company, but Phil Swisher, and the bassist at the time on the Blind record and Deliverance initially, we went and founded Leadfoot and found solace out here in Los Angeles, actually, recording an album for Roadrunner called Bring It On, and moved on to different stuff. And we were going more of a rock direction, exploring our roots, further drifting from the punk rock thing and kind of going further back in time, and taking great influence from 70s and even 60s bands. And but we can't change who we are, our background, our past, and here we are all these years later, and all of a sudden Blind is reissued on 180 gram vinyl. Prosthetic put it out, and somehow is kind of hip again, and has returned to people's gone through their transoms or whatever, and they want to check it out and they're into it. And we look back and it's all worth revisiting because it's well written stuff, and the lyrics are good, and I think it stands the test of time. So you said baffling. Yeah, it was a little surprising that people are still into it, but I've realized coming out here now, finishing 4 weeks on the road, essentially, how important the album has been for so many people. And every night there's a minimum of one testimonial where someone comes up to me and or some of the other guys perhaps, but I know I can only speak for myself, and they tell me that it was either their favorite album or one of their most influential albums in their lives. One of the greatest compliments I received was in Houston, and our tour manager said, "You better get over here to the merch table. We've got this guy here that says he became a tenured professor at a university, in poli-sci professor, because of the lyrics he wrote on Blind." And I came out there and I talked to him, and he said, "Yeah, I was just this kind of kid listening to all this, listening to metal and punk and whatever, and kind of drifting around, and then this album really got a grip on me, and I got into it." And he told me, "Carl, you are the reason I pursued this. You are the catalyst for this," and in no uncertain terms. And it still blows me away. It's hard for me to even say, that I couldn't ask for a greater compliment, that somebody go on and to do something that that lofty, so, and not necessarily, a professor at a university. That's not just a guy starting a band, so.
The Blind record has always stood out amongst the whole COC discography. There's so many great albums with COC, but that record stood out primarily because of the vocals. Here we are now, 2015. We've all aged. We're all older. Sure. Some of us are not as angry as we were 20 years ago. I just barely encompass the whole grasping of anger. Are the vocals in those songs of that era still transcending on stage the way and how powerful they were in 1991?
Yes, they are. I am still angry. I'm more angry. I think we've drifted into a worse place, that people have been more apathetic than ever, and that you can never have enough people speaking truth to power. And everything is incredibly, I don't know, what's the way of looking at it? We're all kind of incorporated, now. It's just there's a lot of power amassing in very few hands, and I don't think there's any kind of conspiracy or paranoia there. It's quite obvious. It's a fact. It's a fact. You just look around you. That's the life we live, and I think that more so now than ever, people need to get out there and really read between the lines and not just take things for granted, and do their best to discern the actual facts from all the fluff and BS that's out there. And those lyrics, I stand by them. I mean, a song like White Noise, do you think there's any less racism in the world? I'd say there's even more than 20, or it's more obvious, or it's, but, all those songs, I stand by them. Mine Are the Eyes of God, it's still a scathing critique of organized religion. You look at what's going on in the Middle East, or even here on our shores with, extreme right-wing Christian terrorism, that people don't even talk about, so it's everywhere. So I feel like it's as important as ever, and even with my new band, it's a shameless plug, but I've got a new band, King Hitter, with two of the guys that are playing in the COC Blind lineup, Mike Brown and Scott Little. Scott Little's been playing with me since 1999 on the second and third Leadfoot albums, and these guys are right here doing the COC Blind thing, but we also have this other thing, and in the same vein as Blind, where I'm trying to, sing and be musical, but also have some kind of substance.